The morning sun cast long shadows across the Afghan mountainside as Master Chief Marcus Ghost Rodriguez adjusted his scope for the third time in 10 minutes. Something felt wrong about this mission from the moment they'd inserted into the valley 12 hours ago. The intelligence reports had been sketchy at best, mentioning possible high-value targets in a compound nestled between two ridgelines. But the details kept changing with each briefing update. Rodriguez had earned his nickname, Ghost, not just for his ability to remain invisible in any terrain, but for his uncanny skill at appearing exactly where he was needed most, often without anyone knowing he was there until the mission was over. At 34, he was one of the most experienced snipers in SEAL Team 6, with over 200 confirmed kills across 4 combat deployments. His teammates respected him not just for his shooting skills, but for his ability to read a battlefield like others read a newspaper. The SEAL team had been tracking a Taliban commander known as the Butcher for 3 months. Intelligence suggested he was planning a major attack on coalition forces, possibly involving suicide bombers targeting a nearby forward operating base that housed over 300 American soldiers. The mission was supposed to be straightforward: insert under cover of darkness, establish overwatch positions, and eliminate the target when he showed himself. But nothing about this operation felt straightforward to Rodriguez. The approach route had been too easy, the enemy presence too light, and the compound too quiet. His instincts, honed by years of combat, were screaming that something was fundamentally wrong with the entire situation. He'd tried to voice his concerns to the team leader, Lieutenant Commander Jake "Hammer" Harrison, but the pressure from higher command to complete this mission was immense. The team consisted of 8 operators, split into 2 fire teams. Harrison led Alpha Team with Rodriguez as Overwatch, while Chief Petty Officer Mike "Tank" Thompson commanded Bravo Team positioned on the opposite ridge. The plan called for Rodriguez to provide sniper support from a concealed position 800 meters from the target compound, while both fire teams would move in for close quarters battle once the target was confirmed. As Rodriguez settled into his hide, carefully constructed among the rocks and scrub vegetation, he noticed movement in the valley below that didn't match the intelligence briefing. There were too many people moving around the compound, and their movements seemed too organized, too purposeful for a simple Taliban hideout. Through his scope, he could see what appeared to be defensive positions being prepared, not the casual activity of a terrorist cell planning an attack. The radio crackled softly in his ear as Harrison's voice came through. "Ghost, this is Hammer. What's your read on the target area?" Rodriguez studied the compound for several more minutes, noting the positioning of vehicles, the pattern of personnel movement, and the overall defensive posture of the site. "Hammer, Ghost. I'm seeing organized defensive preparations down there. This doesn't look like a planning session for an offensive operation. Looks more like they're expecting us," Rodriguez replied, his voice barely above a whisper despite being nearly a kilometer from the nearest enemy position. There was a long pause before Harrison responded. "Copy that, Ghost. Hire says the intelligence is solid. The Butcher is supposed to be meeting with his cell leaders at 0800. That's 20 minutes from now. Maintain Overwatch and report any movement." Rodriguez didn't like it, but orders were orders. He'd been in situations before where intelligence had been wrong, but usually the mistakes were in timing or numbers, not in the fundamental nature of the target. This felt different. This felt like they were walking into something much larger than anyone had anticipated. Through his scope, Rodriguez began cataloging everything he could see. The compound consisted of 3 main buildings arranged in a rough triangle, with several smaller outbuildings, and what appeared to be fortified fighting positions. He counted at least 15 individuals moving around the area, all of them armed and moving with military precision. These weren't ragtag Taliban fighters. These men moved like they had real training. As he watched, a convoy of 3 vehicles approached the compound from the east. Rodriguez adjusted his scope and felt his blood run cold. The lead vehicle was flying a black flag that he recognized immediately. This wasn't just a Taliban operation. This was an ISIS cell, and they were much better equipped and trained than the intelligence reports had suggested. "Hammer, Ghost. We've got a problem. I'm seeing ISIS flags and what appears to be foreign fighters. This is not what we were briefed for. Recommend we abort and call for reinforcement," Rodriguez transmitted, his voice urgent, but controlled. The response came back quickly, but not from Harrison. A voice Rodriguez didn't recognize came over the command frequency. All units, this is Overwatch. Mission is a go. Repeat, mission is a go. Targets are confirmed in location. Execute on schedule. Rodriguez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Overwatch was the call sign for the mission commander back at headquarters, but something about the voice seemed off. The accent was wrong, and the radio protocols weren't quite right. In his years of combat, Rodriguez had developed an almost supernatural ability to detect when something wasn't what it appeared to be, and every instinct he had was telling him that this mission had been compromised. He keyed his radio to Harrison's frequency. "Hammer, did you copy that transmission from Overwatch?" There was no response. Rodriguez tried again. "Alpha Team, this is Ghost, please respond." Still nothing. He switched to Bravo Team's frequency. "Tank, this is Ghost, radio check." Silence. Rodriguez realized with growing alarm that he was cut off from his team. Whether it was equipment failure, enemy jamming, or something worse, he was now operating alone with no way to communicate the critical intelligence he'd gathered. He could see both fire teams moving into their assault positions, completely unaware that they were walking into what was obviously a trap. Through his scope, he watched as the ISIS fighters took positions that would give them perfect fields of fire on the routes his teammates were using. The enemy knew exactly where the SEALs were coming from and when they would arrive. This wasn't a coincidence or lucky positioning. This was a carefully planned ambush. Rodriguez faced an impossible decision. Protocol dictated that he maintain his Overwatch position and provide sniper support for the assault. But Protocol also assumed that the mission briefing was accurate and that communications were functioning. With his radio down and clear evidence that this was a trap, he had to choose between following orders and saving his teammates' lives. As he watched through his scope, Rodriguez saw an ISIS fighter in the compound raise a radio to his mouth. Seconds later, additional fighters began moving into positions that would surround both SEAL fire teams. The trap was about to be sprung, and his teammates had no idea they were walking into a killing field. The Ghost sniper made his decision. He would break protocol, abandon his designated position, and do whatever it took to warn his team and turn the tide of what was about to become a massacre. Time was running out, and 8 of America's finest warriors were about to die unless he acted immediately. Rodriguez began moving from his hide, knowing that once he left his position, there would be no going back. He was about to become a rogue operator, but he would rather face a court-martial than watch his brothers die in an ambush he could have prevented. The mission had gone wrong in ways no one could have anticipated, and now it was up to the Ghost sniper to save his team and complete the mission on his own terms. The sun climbed higher in the Afghan sky as Rodriguez made his way down the mountainside, moving with the silent precision that had made him a legend among Special Operations Forces. Behind him, the sound of approaching helicopters could be heard in the distance, but he knew they wouldn't arrive in time to help. It was up to him now, and the Ghost was about to become very real to the enemy forces waiting below. Rodriguez moved like smoke through the rocky terrain, his ghillie suit blending perfectly with the mottled shadows of the Afghan mountainside. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. He had perhaps 10 minutes before Alpha and Bravo teams reached their final assault positions, and once they did, the ISIS fighters would have them in a perfect crossfire. As he descended toward the valley floor, Rodriguez's mind raced through tactical options. His M110 semi-automatic sniper system was perfect for long-range precision work, but in close quarters against multiple targets, he would need to be creative. He carried 120 rounds of 7.62 mm ammunition, plus his sidearm with 3 additional magazines. Against what he estimated to be at least 25 enemy fighters, ammunition would have to be used wisely. The landscape worked in his favor as he moved closer to the compound. Years of warfare had scarred the valley with shell craters, abandoned fighting positions, and scattered debris that provided concealment. Rodriguez used every piece of available cover, moving in short bounds between positions, constantly scanning for enemy sentries or early warning posts. Through his scope, he could see that the ISIS fighters had positioned themselves with professional military precision. They had established interlocking fields of fire that would create a kill zone encompassing both SEAL approach routes. Machine gun nests were positioned to provide suppressing fire, while rifle teams would pick off individual targets. It was a textbook L-shaped ambush, exactly the kind of trap that had killed countless coalition forces throughout the war. Rodriguez reached a position roughly 400 meters from the compound when he spotted the first sentry. The fighter was positioned in a camouflaged spider hole, barely visible except for the occasional glint of his rifle scope in the morning sun. From this position, the sentry could observe the entire northern approach route that Alpha Team was using. Rodriguez settled into a firing position behind a fallen tree and acquired his target. The suppressed crack of Rodriguez's rifle was barely audible as the 175-grain Sierra Match-King bullet found its mark. The sentry slumped forward, eliminated before he could raise an alarm. Rodriguez immediately shifted position, knowing that in counter-sniper operations, remaining stationary after a shot was often fatal. Moving to his next position, Rodriguez encountered a problem he hadn't anticipated. A three-man patrol was moving along the same route he needed to use to get closer to the compound. The fighters were spread out in proper tactical formation, alert and professional in their movement. Taking them down would require perfect timing and shot placement to prevent any of them from raising an alarm. Rodriguez found concealment behind a cluster of boulders and waited for the patrol to move into his engagement zone. The lead fighter passed his position at 70 meters, followed by the second man at 30-meter intervals. As the third fighter entered his field of fire, Rodriguez took his shot. The bullet struck the trailing fighter's center mass, dropping him silently. The second fighter, hearing his comrade fall, turned to investigate just as Rodriguez's follow-up shot found him. The lead fighter, realizing his patrol was under attack, dove for cover and began reaching for his radio. Rodriguez's third shot ended that threat before any transmission could be made. 3 enemy fighters eliminated in less than 15 seconds, and their absence wouldn't be noticed until they failed to report in at their scheduled checkpoint. As Rodriguez continued his movement toward the compound, he began hearing radio chatter through his earpiece. Someone was jamming the SEAL team frequencies, but the interference was creating breakthrough transmissions. He could make out fragments of Harrison's voice and what sounded like Tank Thompson trying to coordinate with his fire team. The voices sounded urgent, suggesting that his teammates were beginning to realize something was wrong with the mission. Rodriguez reached an abandoned fighting position that provided excellent observation of the compound. From this vantage point, he could see the full scope of the ambush that had been prepared. The ISIS fighters had turned the entire area into a fortress, with prepared positions, ammunition stockpiles, and what appeared to be heavy weapons positioned to maximize casualties when the SEALs entered the kill zone. More concerning was what Rodriguez observed in the largest building of the compound. Through the windows, he could see what appeared to be a command center with multiple radios and what looked like surveillance equipment. Someone was coordinating this ambush from that location, and they seemed to have detailed knowledge of SEAL tactics and procedures. Rodriguez counted at least 8 fighters in the main building, including what appeared to be a senior commander based on the deference shown by the other fighters. If this was indeed the Butcher, he was far better equipped and supported than intelligence had suggested. This wasn't a simple terrorist hideout. This was a sophisticated military operation with connections to larger ISIS networks. Through his scope, Rodriguez watched as a fighter in the command center spoke into a radio, and immediately afterward, several enemy positions shifted their fields of fire. Someone was making real-time tactical adjustments based on intelligence about SEAL movement. Rodriguez realized with growing alarm that the enemy not only knew his team was coming, but they were receiving updates on their exact positions and timing. The ghost sniper faced a tactical dilemma that would have challenged even the most experienced military commanders. His teammates were walking into a trap that had been specifically designed to kill them, but any action he took to neutralize the ambush would alert the enemy to his presence and likely result in them adapting their tactics. He needed to create enough chaos to break up the ambush while simultaneously eliminating key threats that posed the greatest danger to Alpha and Bravo teams. Rodriguez identified his priority targets, the machine gun positions that commanded the kill zone, the command center that was coordinating the ambush, and the heavy weapons positions that could cause mass casualties. Each target would require different tactics and approaches, and he would have to move quickly between positions to avoid counter-sniper fire. The sound of helicopters in the distance was getting closer, but Rodriguez knew they were still at least 15 minutes out. His teammates would be in the kill zone long before air support could arrive. Whatever was going to save Alpha and Bravo teams would have to come from his rifle and his ability to disrupt the carefully planned ambush. Rodriguez began his assault by targeting the northern machine gun position that posed the greatest threat to Alpha Team. The position was well constructed with sandbags and camouflage, but the gunner had made the mistake of positioning his weapon where the muzzle flash would be visible from Rodriguez's angle. Using his range-finding scope, Rodriguez calculated the distance at 380 meters and adjusted for wind and elevation. His shot took the machine gunner in the head, instantly eliminating the threat. The assistant gunner, realizing his position was under attack, attempted to swing the weapon toward Rodriguez's location, but the second shot found him before he could acquire a target. With the northern machine gun position neutralized, Alpha Team would have a chance to reach cover when the ambush was triggered. Moving quickly to a new position, Rodriguez targeted the command center. Through the windows, he could see the commander speaking urgently into multiple radios, likely trying to coordinate a response to the attack on the machine gun position. Rodriguez aimed carefully, accounting for the glass window and the angle of his shot. The bullet shattered the window and struck the commander, causing immediate chaos in the command center as other fighters scrambled for cover. The sound of rifle fire from the compound indicated that the enemy was beginning to panic and fire at shadows. Rodriguez used this confusion to advance to a position where he could engage the southern machine gun that threatened Bravo Team's approach route. This position was more heavily fortified and would require a more direct approach. As Rodriguez moved toward his next engagement position, he heard something that made his blood run cold. Clear English voices were coming from his radio, but they weren't American voices. Someone was using captured radio equipment to monitor SEAL communications and provide updates to the ISIS fighters. The ambush wasn't just based on intelligence about the mission. It was being coordinated in real time using compromised communications. Rodriguez realized that breaking radio silence might expose his position, but his teammates needed to know that their communications were compromised. He keyed his radio and broadcast a brief warning. All units, comms compromised. Ghost going dark. He immediately switched off his radio and prepared to complete his mission without any communication with his team. The Ghost sniper was now completely alone, cut off from all support, facing a numerically superior enemy force that had been preparing for this exact scenario. But Rodriguez had been in impossible situations before, and he had never failed to complete his mission. The lives of 8 SEALs depended on his ability to turn the tide of a battle that hadn't officially started yet. As enemy fighters began moving to investigate the areas where their comrades had been killed, Rodriguez prepared for the most challenging phase of his one-man assault on the ISIS compound. The ambush was beginning to unravel, but the real fight was just beginning. The chaos Rodriguez had created in the ISIS command center was spreading throughout the compound like wildfire. Enemy fighters were abandoning their carefully prepared ambush positions to search for the phantom sniper who had eliminated their leadership and key weapon positions. Rodriguez watched through his scope as tactical discipline dissolved into confusion and panic. But the enemy adaptation was swift and professional. Within minutes, new leaders emerged from the remaining fighters, and they began implementing counter-sniper protocols. Rodriguez observed as teams of fighters began systematic sweeps of the high ground around the compound, while others took positions that would make his approach routes more difficult. These weren't amateur fighters. They had received training from someone with extensive knowledge of special operations tactics. Rodriguez identified his next critical target, a heavy machine gun position that commanded the valley floor where both SEAL teams would have to cross open ground. The weapon appeared to be a Russian-made Cord 12.7mm heavy machine gun, capable of penetrating most body armor at ranges exceeding a kilometer. If that weapon remained operational when Alpha and Bravo teams reached the valley floor, it would slaughter them regardless of whatever other positions Rodriguez managed to eliminate. The heavy machine gun was positioned in a reinforced bunker built into the hillside, with excellent fields of fire and protection from most angles of attack. Rodriguez would have to get much closer than he preferred, but the weapon had to be eliminated before his teammates entered its engagement range. Moving through a drainage ditch that provided concealment from most of the compound, Rodriguez advanced to within 200 meters of the bunker. At this range, he could hear the enemy fighters talking to each other, and what he heard confirmed his worst suspicions. They were speaking in multiple languages: Arabic, Chechen, and what sounded like English with various accents. This was an international ISIS cell with fighters from multiple countries, all with military training. Rodriguez settled into a firing position that gave him a narrow angle on the bunker's firing port. The shot would have to be perfect. He would have one chance to eliminate the gunner before the assistant gunner took over or before other fighters spotted his position. Using his ballistic computer, he calculated the precise angle needed to thread his bullet through the narrow opening in the bunker's armor. The 175-grain bullet struck the heavy machine gunner in the upper chest, the impact spinning him away from his weapon. Rodriguez immediately shifted his aim to the assistant gunner, who was attempting to take over the position. The second shot found its mark just as the fighter's hands reached the weapon's grips. With the heavy machine gun neutralized, Rodriguez had eliminated the single greatest threat to his teammates' survival. But the muzzle flashes from his position had been spotted. Rodriguez heard shouts in Arabic as enemy fighters began converging on his location. He had perhaps 30 seconds before they would overrun his position. Rodriguez grabbed a fragmentation grenade from his kit, pulled the pin, and rolled it toward the approaching fighters before immediately moving to a new position. The explosion scattered the search team and bought Rodriguez precious time, but it also revealed just how many enemy fighters were actively hunting for him. He counted at least 12 fighters moving through his immediate area, all of them equipped with modern assault rifles and moving with professional tactical discipline. Rodriguez realized he needed to create a larger diversion to draw enemy attention away from the routes his teammates would be using. He spotted a fuel dump near one of the outbuildings, several barrels that appeared to contain diesel or gasoline for the compound's generators. A well-placed shot could create an explosion and fire that would force the enemy to respond, potentially drawing fighters away from their ambush positions. Taking careful aim at one of the fuel barrels, Rodriguez sent a tracer round into the metal container. The initial explosion was followed by a much larger blast as the other fuel containers ignited in a chain reaction. Black smoke billowed into the sky, and the resulting fire began spreading to nearby structures. ISIS fighters immediately began responding to the emergency, abandoning their positions to fight the growing blaze. The fuel dump explosion had an unexpected benefit. It created a smoke screen that would provide concealment for Rodriguez's movement and make it difficult for the enemy to coordinate their counter-sniper efforts. But it also had a dangerous downside. The smoke and flames would be visible for miles, potentially attracting unwanted attention from other ISIS forces in the area. Through the smoke and confusion, Rodriguez heard a sound that made him smile for the first time since the mission began. American voices shouting tactical commands. Alpha and Bravo teams had finally reached their assault positions and realized they were facing a larger force than expected. The professional calm in their voices told Rodriguez that his teammates had recognized the situation and were adapting their tactics accordingly. Rodriguez attempted to restore radio contact with his team, switching to backup frequencies and emergency channels. Finally, he heard Harrison's voice crackle through the static. Unknown sniper. Unknown sniper. This is Hammer. If you're friendly, give me 2 shots followed by 3 shots. Rodriguez immediately fired the requested signal shots into the air, and Harrison's response came back immediately. Ghost, is that you? Where the hell are you? Hammer. Ghost is mobile and engaging targets of opportunity. Enemy strength is at least 25 fighters, well-equipped and trained. Heavy weapons neutralized, but they've got prepared positions throughout the compound, Rodriguez transmitted while moving to his next position. Harrison's response was immediate. Copy, Ghost. Alpha team is taking fire from the eastern building. Bravo is pinned down by sniper fire from the northern ridge. Can you provide support? Rodriguez could see the muzzle flashes from the sniper position that was keeping Bravo team pinned down. The enemy marksman was positioned in a well-concealed hide approximately 600 meters from Rodriguez's current position. It would be a challenging shot through smoke and heat shimmer, but well within his capabilities. Settling into a hasty firing position, Rodriguez used his scope to locate the enemy sniper's position. The fighter was good, his muzzle flash was minimal, and his position was well camouflaged. But Rodriguez had been hunting snipers for over a decade, and he could read the subtle signs that reveal the sniper's location. The slight movement of vegetation that didn't match the wind pattern, the geometric lines that didn't belong in the natural landscape, and the shadows that fell differently than they should. Rodriguez's shot found the enemy sniper just as the fighter was acquiring a target on one of Bravo team's operators. The bullet struck the ISIS marksman in the head, instantly eliminating the threat. Through his scope, Rodriguez could see Tank Thompson's team immediately begin moving to a better position, no longer pinned down by sniper fire. But Rodriguez's position was now completely compromised. The smoke was beginning to clear, and enemy fighters had triangulated his general location based on his last few shots. He counted at least 8 fighters moving to surround him, and more were coming from other parts of the compound. Rodriguez needed to relocate immediately or risk being overrun by superior numbers. As he began moving to a new position, Rodriguez heard a sound that changed everything. The distinctive roar of rotary wing aircraft approaching fast and low. Through the smoke, he could see 2 AH-64 Apache attack helicopters approaching the valley, their weapons systems already tracking targets on the ground. Air support had arrived earlier than expected, and the tactical situation was about to shift dramatically in favor of the SEALs. But the Apache helicopters presented Rodriguez with a new challenge. He was now operating in an area where friendly aircraft would be engaging targets, and he needed to ensure he wasn't mistaken for an enemy fighter. Rodriguez activated his infrared strobe beacon, a device that would mark him as friendly to aircraft equipped with night vision systems. The lead Apache began its first gun run on the compound, its 30mm chain gun ripping through enemy positions with devastating accuracy. Rodriguez watched as ISIS fighters abandoned their prepared positions and scrambled for any available cover. The carefully planned ambush was rapidly dissolving into a rout as American firepower overwhelmed the enemy's defensive preparations. Rodriguez keyed his radio. Hammer, Ghost has positive identification on high-value target in the main building. Request permission to engage. Through his scope, Rodriguez had spotted a figure he recognized from intelligence briefings. The butcher himself was attempting to escape from the command building, carrying what appeared to be important documents and communication equipment. This was the target they had come for, and he was about to slip away in the chaos of the air assault. Harrison's response came back immediately. Ghost, you are authorized to engage high-value target. Take the shot. Rodriguez adjusted his scope for the 450-meter shot, accounting for wind drift and the target's movement. The butcher was moving quickly but predictably, heading for a vehicle that would allow him to escape the compound. Rodriguez led his target slightly and squeezed the trigger just as the butcher reached for the vehicle's door handle. The bullet struck the terrorist commander in the center of his chest, spinning him away from the vehicle and ending his reign of terror permanently. The primary objective of the mission had been accomplished, but Rodriguez knew his work wasn't finished yet. With the butcher eliminated and Apache helicopters providing devastating close air support, the ISIS fighters' resistance began to collapse rapidly. Rodriguez watched through his scope as enemy combatants abandoned their weapons and attempted to flee the compound. But his mission wasn't complete. Intelligence gathering was just as important as eliminating the target, and the command center likely contained valuable information about ISIS operations in the region. Rodriguez established radio contact with the Apache flight leader and coordinated his movement toward the main building. Devil 6, this is Ghost. Moving to secure intelligence materials in the primary structure. Request you maintain overwatch and engage any squirters attempting to flee the area. The Apache pilot's response was immediate. Copy, Ghost. We have you visual with your IR strobe. We'll provide overwatch and engage fleeing personnel. Be advised, we're tracking multiple heat signatures moving east toward the ridgeline. Moving through the compound, Rodriguez encountered scattered resistance from ISIS fighters who had taken cover in various buildings and defensive positions. His superior training and equipment advantage allowed him to systematically clear each threat as he advanced. The enemy fighters were demoralized and disorganized, no longer fighting as a coordinated unit, but as individuals desperate to survive. Rodriguez reached the main command building and found it had been heavily damaged by Apache gun runs, but the interior was largely intact. Inside, he discovered a treasure trove of intelligence materials, maps showing planned attacks throughout the region, communication equipment that could be analyzed for network connections, and documents detailing ISIS financial operations and supply chains. Most importantly, Rodriguez found evidence that the ambush had been planned with inside knowledge of SEAL operational procedures. Someone with access to classified information had provided the ISIS cell with detailed intelligence about American special operations tactics, timing, and approach routes. This mission hadn't just been compromised, it had been betrayed from within the coalition command structure. As Rodriguez collected the critical documents, he heard approaching footsteps and voices speaking in English. For a moment, he tensed, thinking enemy fighters were attempting to recapture the command center. Then, he recognized Tank Thompson's distinctive voice coordinating with his team members. Bravo team had reached the compound and was conducting a systematic search of the remaining buildings. Tank, this is Ghost. I'm in the main building collecting intelligence materials. Building is secure, but watch for booby traps in the other structures, Rodriguez transmitted as he continued gathering documents and electronic equipment. Thompson's team entered the building with weapons raised, then relaxed when they spotted Rodriguez methodically searching through enemy materials. Ghost, you crazy bastard, Thompson said with a mixture of relief and admiration. Harrison told us you went off the reservation to save our asses. What the hell happened out there? Rodriguez briefed Thompson on everything he had observed, the evidence of inside intelligence, the professional military training of the ISIS fighters, and the sophisticated nature of the ambush that had been prepared. Thompson's expression grew increasingly grim as he understood the implications of what Rodriguez had discovered. This goes way beyond the butcher, Thompson concluded. Someone with access to our operational planning fed these guys everything they needed to kill us all. We need to get this intelligence back to headquarters immediately. Alpha Team arrived at the compound shortly afterward, and Harrison immediately sought out Rodriguez. The team leader's face showed a mixture of anger and relief as he confronted his sniper. Ghost, you disobeyed direct orders and left your assigned position. I should write you up for insubordination. Rodriguez met Harrison's gaze steadily. Sir, with respect, following those orders would have resulted in 8 Kia and mission failure. My radio communications were jammed, intelligence was compromised, and we were walking into a pre-planned ambush. I made a tactical decision based on battlefield conditions. Harrison stared at Rodriguez for a long moment. Then, his expression softened. 8 confirmed kills, multiple weapon positions neutralized, high-value target eliminated, and critical intelligence recovered, all with 0 friendly casualties. He paused, then extended his hand. Outstanding work, Master Chief. Your actions today saved this entire operation. As the SEAL teams prepared for extraction, Rodriguez continued his search of the compound for additional intelligence materials. In a hidden compartment beneath the command center, he discovered communication logs that revealed the scope of the security breach. Someone within coalition headquarters had been providing ISIS with detailed information about special operations missions for at least 6 months. The extraction helicopters arrived as the sun reached its zenith, their rotors creating dust clouds that provided additional concealment for the SEAL team's departure. As Rodriguez boarded the aircraft with the captured intelligence materials, he reflected on the mission that had started as a routine target elimination and evolved into something much more significant. During the flight back to base, Rodriguez reviewed the documents he had recovered. The intelligence painted a picture of a sophisticated ISIS network with international connections, advanced training programs, and access to high-level coalition intelligence. The Butcher had been just one component of a much larger terrorist organization that posed a serious threat to coalition operations throughout the region. Back at headquarters, Rodriguez's mission report sparked an immediate investigation into operational security breaches. The intelligence he had recovered led to the identification and arrest of a coalition intelligence officer who had been selling classified information to ISIS for substantial financial payments. The security breach had compromised dozens of missions and put hundreds of coalition personnel at risk. Rodriguez's actions during the mission became legendary within the special operations community. His ability to recognize a compromised mission, adapt to changing battlefield conditions, and single-handedly disrupt a sophisticated ambush demonstrated the highest levels of tactical expertise and combat leadership. The mission was studied at military academies and special operations training centers as an example of how individual initiative and expertise could overcome superior enemy numbers and preparation. 6 months later, Rodriguez received the Navy Cross for his actions during the mission. The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism in combat against enemy forces." Master Chief Rodriguez's decisive actions under fire, tactical expertise, and unwavering dedication to his teammates resulted in mission success and prevented catastrophic losses among friendly forces. But, for Rodriguez, the real satisfaction came from knowing that his 8 teammates had returned home safely to their families. In the world of special operations, success was measured not just in missions completed or enemies eliminated, but in bringing everyone home. The Ghost Sniper had upheld that sacred trust, even when it meant breaking protocol and risking his career. The mission also highlighted the evolving nature of the terrorist threat. ISIS and other extremist organizations were becoming increasingly sophisticated in their tactics, training, and intelligence capabilities. The days of fighting ragtag insurgents with improvised weapons were ending. The new enemy was professional, well-equipped, and capable of complex military operations. Rodriguez continued his career with SEAL Team 6, participating in dozens of additional missions throughout the Middle East and other global hotspots. His reputation as the Ghost Sniper grew with each operation, but he never forgot the lessons learned during the mission that had defined his career. Trust your instincts, adapt to changing conditions, and never abandon your teammates, no matter what the regulations might say. Years later, when asked about the mission during a training seminar, Rodriguez would tell young SEALs, "Sometimes the most important decision you make isn't the shot you take, but the shot you don't take. And sometimes, the most important protocol you follow is the one that isn't written in any manual. The protocol that says you do whatever it takes to bring your brothers home." The Ghost Sniper's legend lived on in the stories told by special operations forces around the world, inspiring new generations of warriors who understood that courage, expertise, and loyalty to teammates could overcome any obstacle. In the unforgiving mountains of Afghanistan, Master Chief Marcus Rodriguez had proven that sometimes one person, in the right place at the right time, could change the course of history.